The World Triathlon podcast returns following a blockbuster T1 Indoor World Cup in Levan that Cassandre Beaugrand and Henry Graf blew the doors off. And you can watch them back over on World Triathlon YouTube and triathlonlive.tv in full. And it is the French Olympic and world champion who we will be catching up with for the 100th episode of the podcast in just over a week's time. And if you want to win a year's subscription to Triathlon Live, then just drop us an email at podcast@triathlon.org and let us know what you would like to ask Cassandra next week. The best question will get that subscription unlocked just in time for the Chengdu World Cup and the incoming WTCS races in Yokohama and Alghero in May. But before that, we have the first in what will be a regular series of catch-ups across this season with World Triathlon's Kris Gemmell. So we pick our way across the triathlon ecosystem from the Championship Series to T100 and way beyond to try and explain the partnerships, the plans and the projects that will be helping to propel the sport towards a huge LA 2028 Games. Welcome back, World Triathlon podcast listeners. It's been a busy start to 2025. It's only going to crank up more from here. So as we approach the 100th episode, we're doing something a little bit different. This is not the 100th episode, but the first in a series of regular check-ins from around World Triathlon and beyond with Kris Gemmell. He is New Zealand's two-time Olympian in Beijing and London, turned World Triathlon head of commercial and marketing, all of which, it's fair to say, gives you a pretty comprehensive inside view over everything that's happening out there from plenty of angles, Kris. Fair to say, and welcome.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess let's say it's an intimate knowledge of the situations at hand, and hopefully, that's an advantage on many levels to have a different, lens to everything. And of course, sport and those sort of things are, they're the main elements of what we do from an international federation perspective. But I think it's important that we have to be. We have to be able to have the ability to accept some change and adjust with that, and find ways to work with our strategic partners that are out there doing exactly the same that we're doing in the sport for different reasons, and that's important to acknowledge.
So yes, this is not the 100th podcast. We have some special.
To interrupt. I mean, come on. Like I thought that spot is, but I guess we need to always show these metric differences, between the downloads of like this podcast between you and I, and then the downloads between Cassandra and the 100th podcast. So I get it. I understand where I'm placed in this food chart, but no, in all seriousness, so I think it would be great to celebrate that. We're talking to her. She's got a lot of like things. I think there's a lot to her that a lot of people don't know, and that is as interesting as anything.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of obviously a good place to start. It was Levan at the weekend. Yeah, Cassandra conquered that in similarly emphatic fashion. Like, just to take it back from there a little bit, then it is quite amazing to see her, like the progression of someone like that's career up close and personal, from that first series win in Hamburg, kind of going under the radar a little bit, and now to see her not just like meeting that potential and expectation, but like just absolutely exceeding it. It's just been a brilliant like period of time to watch her doing her thing.
Yeah, she's just matured. It's as simple as that, right? She's grown as an athlete, and and maybe even just that was one of the hardest things. I think in general for many athletes during their career, it's to accept that like you do all of that hard work, and there will be a result at the end, and it could be that it's a fruitful result, and that's something that you have to kind of like welcome as well. You always seem to end up in a scenario where you're only surrounded by the focus of when things go wrong. But when things go right, you also have to be able to have the ability to handle that. What comes next? How can I get better? And I think like that's a big step in an athlete's career, is accepting, they're good at this. They're really good at this. And that with that comes some sort of responsibility to yourself, that you don't just waste this talent that you have, and this ability to focus, this ability to stay mentally strong. So I think, like I don't speak for Cassandra, but I think that shows in her progression in her career. Like, I don't think anybody ever doubted her talent in the sport, or what she could do and what she was going to do. But, it took some time. And now it's, she feels comfortable in that environment, and whether it was in Paris, straight afterwards coming to Torremolinos, or then now rocking back to doing something at home in France with some global eyeballs on a new concept, and then people just expecting you to win. Like, that's as hard as, trying to get into the final itself for, for other athletes. So like, you have this career, this way that your career goes, and that's where she is at the moment in her career. So I think she's doing a great job.
A microcosm of which would be that swim in Torremolinos, world champion. She's gone in as Olympic champion. She's got the world title on the line. She's gone way off course and pulled it back like in ridiculous fashion and pulled it through. When at the sounds, she might have just kind of, or anybody else might have crumpled.
Exactly. It's like believing in yourself that like those things, when things go wrong, that's not the end. Like there's like that you have the ability to find another way of winning. Like it was always a thought process of athletes when they get to that point, then they finally win, that they try to replicate that every single time because okay, that's how I won. But the biggest movement is like, I can win many, many different ways. And I think like that was another moment in her career. Like she's like, okay, like, this is definitely not what should have happened. I've made a mistake here. I need to rectify this mistake. I'm good enough to do that. I feel like I'm the best out here. So then I just have to find my space and bide my time. And then when the moment comes, then I have to capitalize again when I get myself back in the game. And that was a good example of that.
And to capitalize on what you have achieved, which it looked like post Olympics, she was definitely enjoying herself and making just welcoming all those opportunities that were coming her way. As that in itself is a huge part of it, right? Coming out of an Olympics or a world title, and as you said, like making the most of the fruits of that moment. And the last thing you want to do is look back on a time like that and be like, damn, I wish I'd done a bit more of this or that. And
yeah. No, exactly. And like, I mean, I can give some unique perspectives into that scenario. I don't think we'll save that for another time that we chat, but like I was there in 2004, living and spending time with Devin Doherty when he won the silver medal in New Zealand, and sort of like, being attached to that happiness, but not actually, none of it being the derivative directly of what you were doing, but like indirectly of being that support network. And then again, going for the same scenario in 2008 in Beijing, where I was living with Jan Frodeno, and we were living together, and we separated when we went to Beijing with the idea and concept that we both had a chance, and then you return back, and there's the gold medal sitting on the coffee table, and it went so well on the left, but it didn't go so well on the right. So like you really have to like battle with yourself emotionally at those points in time. But like, I guess I have a unique perspective of that. So like, to answer the question around Cassandra, like, you make hay while the sun's shining, and if you choose to do it differently, then of course that's your choice. But I think like that's what you got to do. You got to capitalize from those moments. They come along every 4 years. They don't get handed out very often, and you have to earn it to get there, and it takes a lot of bloody work. So you should revel in it as much as you can. As long as you can balance it emotionally, then you should enjoy it.
We're going to hold you to that then, because after hearing the story around Beijing over some ramen in Yokohama last year, direct from the horse's mouth, we'll do the Olympic drill down, and that could be it.
Might need to get a sports psychologist on at the same time, so that I don't, that we have the balance in my emotional standpoint.
So yeah, Leah Van, Cassandra back with an absolute bang. No race rustiness there whatsoever. But yeah, let's just talk about that as a race, as an event. Unmistakable to have seen the different branding on the standard kind of World Triathlon World Cup event. So give us the backstory behind the T1.
Yeah, I think like obviously this is another extension of the relationship that we're fast developing with the PTO, with the Professional Triathletes Organization. Obviously that started a year and a half ago, in terms of 2 years ago, a long time ago actually, during conversations between myself and Sam Renoff when he was here in Stockholm a long time ago, nearly 2.5-3 years ago. So like we always had this like idea and understanding that that's what they wanted to do. Okay, they also needed, and similar to the conversation we just had before about as an athlete's journey, they also had their own journey about like where they wanted to be, how they were positioning themselves, with the stuff with the Collins Cup, and they need to find where their market was and how to get the investors in from that privatizing side of things to sort of share in the vision that they have. I don't speak for them, but all I can say is that we share in what they're trying to do. And we see that like we have a role as an international federation in that, and they see that role and they've seen that from the start. So instead of heading off in different parts and then trying to find some connective tissue down the road, they've taken this step, and we've taken the step to try to do it from the start as closely as we possibly can and work in that direction. So these types of like new exciting products, obviously this event as itself is like been around for 4 to 5 years in terms of what they've been doing in Leuven with the support of Europe Triathlon, and then of course from us the last 2 years as a World Cup. But this was sort of like then going another step forward, which is like, providing some additional investment into the event, let's say taking it from a more expansive brand perspective. And okay, those things, commercially speaking, they have to line up. It doesn't make any sense to start carving things out in a way which is not representative of what could happen in the future. So those collaborative approaches are really welcomed. Of course, the national federations, like the French Federation in this particular standpoint, are completely on board with what we're trying to do, how we can support the club infrastructure as well, which I think is like, as hugely as important as having an international event is like the understanding, the development of the feedback that goes into why this event is there, and then seeing this sellout stadium and seeing these age group races and kids races and paratriathlon races happening all day. Okay, they weren't live on television, but I can assure you that the day started at 9 o'clock in the morning and it went all the way till 10:30 at night. So it's just a whole entire day of just great triathlon. But from when you stand there from a commercial perspective, you can say, okay, well, this looks fantastic. You rub your hands together, like this is going to be great for the sport. At the same time, whilst it looks like easy, here's a stadium, you put things in it, it's fantastic, build a pool, wonderful. It doesn't look so hard as like we have, sometimes challenging from a outside environmental side when we're trying to deliver races in some of the biggest cities in the world. But operationally, it's still a lot, and it still takes a lot of organizing, and it still takes a lot of understanding and a lot of people, and close to like, I don't want to misquote, but I think I'm pretty close to like 350 to 500 volunteers, running around across the day in 3 different shifts. So like it takes an army to put this on. And going forward, like these are the types of things as an international federation, which is what we work with the PTO, is to say, okay, one part is like just doing things. The other part is like, will they be sustainable and how can we make them sustainable? So we nurture the investment in a way which then it's not us as a controlling factor saying where they need to spend their money in the sport, but just to give a different lens on it or a different filter that's saying, okay, it's great, it's fantastic, but how can we help to make sure that this is like nurtured in a way that everybody can get involved in it, everybody can potentially think about delivering these events or hosting these events, and it doesn't just require a massive amount of underwrite from our side to get them to happen.
Because it did start out as that European Cup, right? 5-6 years ago. So I wonder, how do you know how that was first envisaged? Did they have this like long-term picture when it first emerged that they felt it had that potential, and they must have been delighted as a LOC or to suddenly have the PTO level of interest in it as well. And like you said, it needs those deep pockets, that investment, to be able to make the most of what is already a brilliant race setup and situation.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I would just say that I don't want to misquote the Leuven Triathlon Club and everything that they've done and putting us an event, but I don't think they necessarily had this global perspective, right? And I will quote Lolo, who is one of the biggest, energy behind this, is the former club president of Leuven and was like the director, let's say, of the event director of the race. And he said to me like, "This is so great. So thank you. We love it. It's like, it's gone well again this year." But of course, they're also cautious with like, you need to make sure that he knows how much work has to go into this thing, but don't necessarily get to the point where you start to have 20 of these next year, because like that'll be like problematic. So that's where we need to be at. And that's where like, I think like from our side, that's where the collaboration with PTO works really, really well. And the relationship that that, for example, I had with Sam and Antonio as the new president, as with the chairman, Kris Gemmell, like, and then of course with the athletes board, we want to, make sure that they're of course centrally involved in these decisions, as is our athletes committee, so that we're taking decisions for the greatest body of the part of the sport, which is the athletes as a whole, and not like created something that's fantastic on one side, but is impossible to manage from an athlete perspective on the other. So that's our role here, is just to like try to nurture that commercial intention.
So you said like, yeah, not 20 next year. Is there a picture? Is there a vision for more? Is there anything we can speak of about that, the T1 format building next year?
Yeah, I can't give everything away, right? But like, let's say that, of course, that's the goal. The goal is to, like, of course, build from here. Of course, we got a huge amount of interest prior. We got a huge amount of interest of people that came to watch the event. The type of interest that I would say that, like, we only see at events that, are the Olympic Games from us in that sense, and some of our championship series. So like, it's that type of interest from our side. And of course the PTO and the T100 interest as well. So the collaboration also, there's a general interest in like, what are you guys going to do next? So like, that's great, because I think like that is like leading to like formulations of new potential opportunities. So yeah, like, of course, the goal at the end of the day would be to expand. What that expansion looks like, let's wait and see. We're not in a rush. We know that we need to make sure that this is done well. And of course, as you know yourself, being inside the World Triathlon Organization, that is something we do really, really well, in terms of like the reviewing of all of the outcomes of everything in terms of the procedural side, that we can now like give to the PTO and say, okay, like, these are the findings that we found from a sport technical side, from a production side, all these types of things. And they can then take that knowledge as a transfer that they can use in terms of deciding from a commercial perspective what their intentions are. So I think like that is where the collaborative approach is going to work really well.
And what can you speak?
I dodged your question that you asked me, and I didn't give you any number. So, but you
watch this space.
Yeah, as you know, there's a large political part to me that I'm pretty good at. So I'll continue that along these conversations that we have.
This is audio only, but you'd race the grey mist that has just gone through Kris's camera is. But yeah, so you were there in person. Just give us a little lowdown of that atmosphere when Cassandre came out. Like, there's some brilliant race atmospheres around the world, but stick a flipping roof on these things, and you just see the way the athletes react to that, and to the noise, and the opportunity to be in an arena environment is something totally different.
Yeah, and I think like that's where I can like, as you said in the introduction, that's where I like feel like I've got this good lens, because I can sit down and have these conversations with people that are considering to, invest in this as a concept. And I can tell them like, I have had this before in a different way, but it's like, it's captured points in my mind. So like the Olympics in London, running through Hyde Park, where you couldn't hear yourself breathe because there was just so many people, like that comes automatically to my mind, right? And like these types of things, and same when in Auckland, when it was a home race, and like you had this like level of support, which was almost like fan based, which is what you see in football and stadia type scenarios. So like I feel like when you package that, then which is kind of what we see in the T1, then it feels, it hits home. Like I'm saying, like you can't hear yourself think. You're having to like control your emotions, so forth. And then you're going to like almost this home atmosphere, like what Cassandre had, where she's like, there's just these 5,500 screaming people, and literally screaming for her, because not to say that there aren't other supporters from the other athletes there, but that the large amount of people are there are French, and because you're in the French. And that's what, like hosting of these types of events can actually create. Not that that doesn't work in the same way when you go to Hamburg or whatever, but it's a different type of vibe, because you're essentially being able to like create it with the sports presentation, with the entertainment package, everything. So yeah, okay, there's extra things for Cassandre and all the French athletes that they had to do at the same time, but that's the way the sport works. And I think that is something that's super exciting, and like for me was resonating when I was there.
Yeah, each, I suppose one of the hardest things perhaps for like a series or a World Cup point of view, for at least the ones that aren't as established, or there's always going to be new race venues coming on and but trying to give each one its own personality, which inevitably has to echo like the local crowd and people as well. Like, it's part of the city, it's part of the that whole atmosphere, personality that it brings. That's something that isn't straight, it doesn't come automatically. Sometimes it takes ages, sometimes it's just a case of like a really like into it local crowd. But I guess from a outside perspective, that's perhaps something that is not totally understood sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, and look, you could also go into deeper detail of saying that, okay? Like, when you're, like, going in a stadium that's, the size of Leeuwenhoek, it's hard to pack it out, but they do pack it out, and that's fantastic, but you can take this large chord idiot audience from, like, probably some low-hanging fruit in the sense that it's a smaller city. You can touch pretty easily all these people. Now, when you go to the larger cities, let's say if we go to the Toyota Tokyo Arena, for example, in Japan, and we do the same thing there, then, okay, the stadium is another 10,000 seats on top of that. More seats to fill, but then you have more people to fill them. So the problem becomes a luxury problem rather than a small problem. But it's again like working out how we like profile, where we want to be, what gives the best cultural situation, and to be again very transparent. The advantage that this scenario has, is the same way that it does on an e-triathlon side of things, is that it doesn't become calendar related in the sense of it doesn't become seasonal. You can go somewhere if it's indoor at any time of the year. Okay, we have to manage the athletes' calendars in the way that they have to prepare for their season, and knowing that there's like an outdoor concept, an indoor concept, etc., etc. But at the same time, if we're able to do that, and then we had a clear narrative around that, then the athlete, and then they know in time, then the athletes and their coaches and the National Federation high performance programs can sit down and they can decide how to do that. Not a problem. But if it's like a little bit all over the place, which is, part of the reason again for us to sort of like be more involved as we possibly can, then we can nurture that calendar perspective as well, so that we're at the essence looking after the athletes, which of course is the most important part of the piece of the puzzle.
Did you get to have a little chat with Cassandre at any point? Did you get a vibe from her, a little side convo about, doing this as her first race, well, first World Triathlon race? She's going to go straight into the Super Tri E-World Champs as well in a couple of weeks, right? So this is again like a taste of her just wanting to get back out racing, whatever that looks like.
I did talk to her, but like, let's say I didn't talk to her about that. We just had a fireside chat over breakfast. So, but I think like that's also important. Like, it's the last thing I want to do is like sit down and and grill the athletes. But if they want to have a chat, I'm always open. I mean, during the briefing, Hayden Wild did a nice job of throwing me under the bus on a comment in front of the athletes. But that's the fun of it, and that's where I don't mind having this like association where athletes know me as in my previous life, but they also know what I stand for now and the job that I have to do in where I am now. I'm always going to be for them. I just have to be able to see it through a different lens, and they appreciate that. But I think like from Cassandre's perspective, like obviously sitting down with her team and deciding how she wants to start not only her season, but like her defense of her world championship title, or carrying on this progression, like I said before, of like what she did in terms of the leap that she made to be the Olympic champion. Like, there you have to think about it, really carefully. And if like doing a lot of those things that you need to do from a media side and from a sponsorship side, the last thing you want to be doing is starting to travel all over the world, And if you can go down to Leuven and then you can pop across to London, like that's a good setup. So you take decisions like that based upon those things too, right? Not just because it looks like that it's happening haphazardly. Like, there's reasons for that, And then I saw that, like, I even saw on the weekend that like Beth ran, I think 31:15 for a 10K run in the north of England. Then like looks like it's going to be a nice bit of fireworks when they get together finally, in terms of the paces that they're running, doing things differently. And Alex is doing the marathon, like. I think it's great. People might feel that that's weird, me saying that, like, well, they're not doing our races, and like we lose that sort of like connectivity. No, I think that having that, like, legitimizing them as the best athletes in the world and going over and doing these things, as you pointed out before, breaking national records or being as fast or if the fastest females running in that country running like that says says more than what we need to do with them turning up to our race and winning our races. Like that'll happen because they're triathletes and they want to come and compete. But if they're doing these other things, it's legitimizing them as athletes in general, like being some of the best all-rounded endurance athletes in the world. And I think for me that's fantastic, because in my eyes that's what they are.
Yeah, 100%. Is this something that is like increasingly happening? Did it always, obviously post Tokyo, the gap to the next Olympic cycle was a lot shorter. I don't know, traditionally it's like a time of churn somewhat, but I always felt it was more people going long distance, but now it feels like they're going off down different avenues, whether it's 10K, 5K, cross country, marathon.
Yeah, look, I've got the head on now, so I can be really political in this answer. Like our role as the IEF, of course, is to provide a stronger base to the foundation, and that then gives the opportunities to the high performance programs to do whatever they want, because we're not controlling or constructing that on how they want to create high performance and where that funding comes from, either government or commercial sources, to be able to find and at the end of the day get more people going to the Olympics and have more opportunity to win medals for their NOCs. That's in essence that scenario. So if we are able to be in a situation where our stars are like doing things and then they will do our races, like they're not going to necessarily disappear, or they're doing races that we're part of, or we're doing races that we are as an international federation have some meaning to, then in that sense they're part of the system that will then of course go back into the Olympic qualifying side, which is then heading up into the cycle for 2028 and LA. And in that time, as I saw in Living Again, then you have this crop of other athletes, which in the end will be the new crop coming forward. And that's the machine that we are in essence creating as part of the ecosystem. And we have to be able to support that. We have to be able to give them the opportunities at the top, but at the same time, the opportunities have to be at that level through the continental side, et cetera, et cetera. And like this, like, it's a change of like lateral thinking from a cultural perspective internally in the organization. It wasn't always there, but I think slowly we have an understanding, like if we are focusing more of our attention in this area, then this will also help everybody else in the sport. Doesn't matter, all private organizers, not just the ones that we have clear and obvious collaborations with, but other private organizers in the sport will benefit from the fact that we are able to put more athletes in the pipeline, and high performance programs are able to have better and well-performing athletes in the pipeline because they have better resources and better availability to all the things like scientific research and nutrition, et cetera, training. So we're all working together, but everyone, of course, is taking a bit when they want to. But in the end, we're in the middle, and we have to somehow not control. I wouldn't use control, but have some order if we can, and also some opportunity to be able to provide assistance to all these areas that are floating around us. But we have to do that. We have to focus on that. And if we make that like a key component of what we're doing, then I think that's the better for everyone.
Mm. Yeah, that pipeline is definitely getting fatter and fatter, right? The number of race opportunities, events, it sometimes looks, I mean, people might not necessarily know too much beyond World Series or World Cups, but how many events there are going on out there. But I suppose what it boils down to is it's great. It feels like it's a great time to be an athlete now in terms of the opportunities, in terms of the career pathways, and I'm sure a lot of stuff there that you probably wish had been around.
Yeah, exactly. I can be hugely jealous of that situation, I'm sure. And that's not to say that there wasn't great opportunities when I was there. There was also these type of expansion scenarios, similar to like what we have in Super Tri when we had the Formula One sort of series. It was called down in Australia. And, like there was lots of different things. We had the French Giant Tour that was part of the French Grand Prix, still going now, brilliantly well done by the French Federation. Like there's still all those things around, but it was just that like now there's real like visibility attached to those things, whereas kind of you were doing them and all of a sudden people didn't really know you were doing them, and then you would arrive to a World Cup and everyone would be like, where you been? Oh, I've been doing this. Oh yeah, no, I heard about that. Whereas like that's not the case now. Everybody knows where everybody is because of social media and the way that the world works. So now these things have more visibility, which in turns means that like if we have more connectivity to them, we can like assist and help and provide where we can as an IS.
Mm. And again, post games, there's always that immediate sort of fallout. Isn't that the right word for like the thing that everyone's working for so long? But for someone like, as a high profile example, Taylor Knibb saying that, you know, LA wasn't really kind of in her sights straight after Paris, but now anyone that's listened to the brilliant Chasing the Burn podcast, sounds like the door is creeping back open for her on there again.
Yeah. And I mean, like, okay, like, I mean, Taylor's a good example. There's many, many more out there, but like what she did in the T100 at the same time, she was also, you know, contributing her time to the championship series and the Olympics. And even from a cycling perspective too, what she was doing is amazing things over there. I mean, it's just insane that the stuff that she's doing. And so amazing to be in presence of her when she's racing and knowing that skill level. But at the end of the day, like there's no shutting of doors on our side. She can come back. That is the relationship that US Triathlon have to have with her and her team and the people around her, which she looks like she's got a great group of people around her taking those decisions for her to say, look, okay, like we just need to keep the communication open. And, you know, we're never not saying that anybody can enter our races at any point in time in that sense, right? So like that's the good thing about like what's happening in the future, that, like I said, you can go away and do what you feel like you need to do. But when it comes down time, I mean, I know if I was an American athlete and I had a home Olympic Games in America as a commercial property, I'd be kicking and banging the door furiously to try to get in. But, you know, I don't speak for everyone.
Yeah, well, and then similar. Well, I will get to the start of the T100 in Singapore soon. But for someone like Hayden, who talking to him ahead of Abu Dhabi, one of his reasons behind this being such a busy year is that he doesn't want to, you know, too much T100, and you start to even someone like he is worried about getting those World Series starts and the points and needing that ticking over as well, and having to figure out how to combine the two.
Yeah, and it's what you said before, and we're like before, like let's say there weren't as many events, so the pipeline was a little bit more restricted, right? So the opportunity to get international exposure or high level events was a little bit lower. So your progression just took a little bit longer. Yeah, okay, you had the few extraordinary athletes that, you know, could go through the pipeline really quickly, but in general, it was a little bit slower. So now you have a scenario where there's more opportunity. Of course, like I said before, we need to like nurture that and be able to like spend more time making sure those events, those let's say those continental events with our continental confederations, the World Cups and so forth, they're almost should be like at a championship series level. You know, like we need to be able to like get to that type of an energy or that type of a image. Then that just accelerates the opportunity because everyone's exposed in that way, both mentally and physically and emotionally earlier. And that's not to put undue amounts of pressure, but it's also to be able to give the opportunities to the national federations to facilitate this the way that is progressing. And but if you don't have that there, then of course things are moving along a little bit slower. So that's where I feel like that'll like keep going. Whereas like the gap, if you walk away, the gap you leave will be filled very quickly because things will continue to move right. They won't be stagnant. They could be stagnant from a perspective, maybe I'm reaching here a little bit, but just let's say from a personal opinion, they can get stagnant from a way the race goes. Like let's say if the best athletes at the moment in the world are runners as much as they are swimmers and bikers as far as the full package, or if the best athletes become the swimmers and bikers and then the runners as part of the full package, then the sort of the context of the race can change. And you can come back and you can be like, okay, hang on a second, I left when everything came together after 20K on the bike, and I come back now and I'm out after 10K because I'm 2.5 minutes behind the front group because they're working like crazy. Like those things can happen, and that's got nothing to do with personal performance. That's just with the way that training and where you see, like as a coach, you might say, okay, like I think the race is going here. Now we need to focus more attention on this. I'm getting into specific details here, but like I said, got some intimate knowledge and some intimate personal perspective. But I just think that those types of things change the way racing happens as much as just being a little bit better in one discipline. Like it's an overall concept that people latch onto and they go, okay, now I need to do this. And I think that was no better example of that than the Ali Brownlee, Johnny Brownlee, Javier Gomez period of time, where they were clearly the best runners, but they were also absolutely, without a shadow of doubt, clearly the best swimmers and clearly the best riders to many extent. And you can have many people come on your podcast and tell you that they don't necessarily agree with me, but I think it would be a hard conversation to have with most historians of the sport to say otherwise. But that changed the sport because it went from a, let's say, an example where everyone was going here to the point where if you were not in the front, you had to rely on a lot of luck. So, and that's what's happening with the sport. It changes, and I'm sure that it will change again in the future.
Yeah. As neatly put together as well by Jess Learmonth, who we were lucky enough to go and visit more on that later for a new documentary series. And she was, she's obviously coming back as one of the T100 hotshots, having been away from racing for a little while. And yeah, between her, Katie Zafiris, Georgia Taylor-Brown, Flora Duffy, they were totally dictating those races. And it was funny seeing, we always used to see her like very animated on those start lines. What I hadn't fully appreciated was that she was literally telling everybody like where to go, whose feet to get on, so that they could get away as quickly as possible. Katie, you tuck in there. Georgia, you come in there. And like, that was an era where there was 5 or 6 athletes just dictating the way those races were going in many ways.
Exactly. I use the men's example, but that is even better. Like, yeah, like that is an even better example of the way it happened. And like even before then, we had the Siri Lindley and Loretta Harrop and like Susan Williams. Like they were great swimmers, and they just basically took the race down the road. And then you had Emma Snowsall and Emma Moffat. Like these progressions in sport, they happen because, of course, like I said, tactically, coaches come with see their athletes with the different strengths, and then they focus that attention. And that's what, from it, like what I said, like that's what Flora and, like you said, like Georgia and Katie and that lot were doing. And then Gwen, like Gwen had to reinvent herself in that scenario. The day that Gwen came out in the first group, I remember for the first time, it was not that everybody was just cheering. I think there was like a shout of like, oh my God, like what, like, okay, well then that was our card we played it and it didn't work. Like people can reinvent themselves and they change the sport. And that's what I think will happen in the next few years leading into LA. It'll require somebody to say, okay, let's collectively think about this, and it'll happen.
Henry Graff looks like the real deal, doesn't he? It's not,
not
to segue too explicit, but he's a case of someone who perhaps like German triathlon, mainly, I guess the women's side looks unbelievably strong at the minute, but at the same time on the men's side, there was a real like thick pack of talent that he wasn't able to push through and get those starts. But he's a perfect example of like a strong federation and not being able to get those starts too early, actually potentially helping him, and he's been able to develop under the radar. That opportunity comes through, bam, Abu Dhabi 4th, and then Levan just absolutely took it.
No, again, the value of a centralized system. I can speak a little bit more closely about the particular German system because I lived there for numerous amounts of years and was really implanted into this. And that's a centralized system. They have, of course, athletes that don't live necessarily in Saarbrücken at the National Training Center, and they find ways to work because they've had to over time because everyone's different. But there is also the advantage of being in that system in terms of the accelerated learning, as I mentioned before. So you can see that as much as it is good to find the diamonds amongst them, and it looks like, they said, okay, this is what Jan Frodeno looked like. We'll just clone this guy over here and we'll just put him in another uniform. That's what, and then you got Henry Graff. But, you got Tim Hellwig, he's currently injured, like he was, doing amazing things in the last couple of years as well, getting on World Championship finals podiums and being Olympic medalists, like these guys, they're there. It's just, there's so many other ones with them as well, which makes it hugely difficult. It's a luxury problem for the German Federation to have, but I think it's one of those things which they then take with a lot of respect and responsibility, as you mentioned, and like making sure the time's right. We have under 22 categories, we have junior categories, like don't necessarily need to rush them through the pipeline if you don't need to rush them through the pipeline. So, again, luxury problem for them to have, because they probably have a larger group of people to be able to manage that situation. Some national federations, some NOCs don't have the luxury of that. That's, again, part of our role, to be able to support those ones, to be able to feel like they have the same opportunity every time they go, to be able to get the resources they get to be able to perform. But, it's, again, big national federations, small national federations, big high performance programs, not necessarily like expansively resourced and sourced high performance programs. They need a little bit more help. So then we can try to provide that, through the World Triathlon team, through the development squad. So like many, many, many ways. But at the end of the day, the national federations are doing what they want to do. And World Triathlon is, let's say well away from that in terms of what they're doing. We're not having much of a say, but they're doing a pretty good job over in Germany by the looks of things.
Okay, and he was able to obviously pull clear of the pack, which included Hayden Wild, who is making this kind of incredible straddling of different formats this year. I guess we just to draw a line under Levin, but like that poor guy, him and Grail of France in the same lane in that final, just at exactly the same pace, and that's the last thing either of them wanted, was to be side by side for 200 meters in that pool. Definitely didn't help either of their chances, did it?
Yeah, no, I think there was a couple of conversations afterwards from both of them on that standpoint. But again, like, get together, work it out before the race, I'm not to have any sympathy for anyone in that sense, because I have to have a different bit of, not to have a conflict of interest, of wear the New Zealand flag proudly. But, these things, you got to find a way. That said, like what the guys are doing in that level, like some of them was for me just over 2 minutes, for 200 meters. Well, maybe, like for me, that's ridiculous. That's I couldn't barely break 2:15. I was lucky when I was back in my day. So, the progression of the sport is, as I said, move forward into different stratospheres. So, but yeah, it's just like, it's a cool dynamic. And like I said, cool events. And I think like going forward, having those benchmarks is pretty cool too, right? Like when you have like a distance, it's always, like great to see, when you can see it for yourself as a fan. Okay, like they clearly swam that's the time they did. We know what time that is. We swim in a pool before ourselves. When you're swimming in open water, it's always difficult. There's always a variance, plus or minus 2 to 3% in terms of the GPS working. So it just gives a different character to the event. It gives some real certainty to the factual information that you're receiving. And that's exciting because you can have a direct comparison.
So a slight tangent then, but do you feel that obviously the fastest in the world at running, swimming, biking over various distances, they're all getting faster bit by bit. Do you feel like the triathletes are closing the gap quicker on those fastest in their individual disciplines?
I think, well, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer. Let me try to answer it in a way which is like a little bit more fluffy. Like what I would say is like them as endurance athletes, and like, living here in Stockholm, getting like blanketed with winter sport for 8 months. We have a lot of biathlon, for example, on the television, and you can see that this is just so hard. This is such a hard sport. They're just smashing themselves in cross country skiing. They're just, they're competing, and they're competing at altitude. So they're competing at like this 95 and 100% of their maximum heart rate, and at altitude. Like they're just mincing themselves, like you see on the cycling when they do the big climbs, up the big mountains. So from my perspective, like I think that like our athletes are just like, they have the capacity as an endurance athlete to be so good, because they just have like such a large aerobic base that they can pretty much pick up most sports and be pretty decent at it. If they've got some sort of hand-eye coordination, they'll be good at, probably most of them will be reasonably good at ball sports, because they'll be able to run around all day. But it's just this ability where, like, I think like now when you see it individually, you see how they're like really good individually, and like as part of the package, they love the sport. And I always said this to like people that follow the sport, like for a long period of time, you had like, like you never saw really the first generation of like what is a kid that wanted to do the sport. When the triathlon was first born, they were coming from swimming, you were coming from biking, you were coming from running, and you were sort of like accumulating. That's still happening to this day. And that not to be the case. That's still happening. But it's more like kids are like they know the sport when they're younger and they can attach themselves to this, and they generally say, I want to be a triathlete. It's fantastic. But then you are getting a real triathlete when they arrive to the sport, because they've been well-rounded. They've never had a focus on one thing more than the other when they've been, like, let's say, going from like age 10 to 11 to 12, or maybe even younger. But like, so they've always been doing all of the three as much as they're only doing one. Where like some of the people were like, they were just only running until they were like 18 years old, and then they started riding their bike, or till even later in life. Some of them now, as you know, have been Olympic medalists in our sport. So I think the generation change is there, and that is absolutely key. And now it might get to the point where you have the opposite, which is like you get athletes that like realize that they're as good at something individually that like then the other sports are poaching from us, which is happening. And they go across there because they're like, okay, these individuals as athletes have like a huge capacity, and they haven't even been doing the hours of training single discipline minded than the people we have currently on our books. So I think like this is something more of a real fit to our sport than the other side, which is like, more private organized in the sport, more opportunity and less consolidation of the calendar. It's most like, like
Poaching from.
yeah, well, I know it's a poaching, but I mean, like, what? I mean, like, I'm not, I can only imagine that Alex is going to, I hope he runs like, I reckon he's going to run 2:08, maybe lower, maybe for sure. I'm sure he wants to run under 2:10, for example. But let's be honest, he's done training for a marathon for a few months, and you go out and do that. There's not many people in the world that can say they're going to start training for a marathon for a few months and then potentially go and have the ability to do a time like that. So, everyone would say, yeah, imagine if he trained all of that time. And he'd probably say it to himself. But of course, we even know that Alex is a clever, intelligent guy, and he's got a great team around him. He'd do what he wants in his life. And I would be the biggest supporter on the side clapping on, because I think he's an amazing athlete. But it's pretty incredible, like what the talent that some of them have individually speaking in the disciplines that they have to be able to cross over and do those things is crazy. And that's getting benefited on the T100 side as well. And that's where, that collaboration is so tight as well, because these athletes are coming through this high performance pipeline, and then they're going there rather than they're getting plucked from long distance where they haven't been part of those pipelines, and they have this like high performance mentality. Then the level just goes straight up. And that just makes it more competitive. That makes it more exciting. And then that just heightens the brand.
Yeah, we saw Jelle back at it in Geelong, Martin Van Riel doing ridiculous bits last year, joined now by your Vincent Luises, your Haydens, your Morgan Pearsons, Leo Bergers. That is going to be super exciting. And again, I suppose speaks to like the versatility of these athletes, like being able to make that step up, and talking about like clean sweeping, hot shot clean sweep of the first podium and so on, which in itself is kind of ridiculous. And I'm sure Martin and Jelle will have plenty to say about that.
I'm sure they're all touched. Yeah, but I mean, like this concept, which, you hear on a lot of podcasts or whatever, but like this concept of like our athletes, or that it's not our athletes. They're their own individuals. They do what they want when they want. And like when people said to me, or coming to me, no, are you, like what's going to happen to the championship series? People that are leaving there and going to do this, they're not doing anything other than they want to do. We're providing them an opportunity to do whatever they want, and we feel like that's a great opportunity for them to have a further longevity of their career without necessarily having to take a bigger jump and do a far long distance, let's say, as an example. And like, whether you think you can come back or not, that's for the jury's out on that, and we'll talk about that in LA. But that's again not my decision. It's the decision of the athletes. Our role here is to give them as much opportunity to be as professional as they possibly can, and at the same time raise the credibility of them as athletes around the world. And if we can use different ways to do that, then that, as an international federation, in my opinion, should be as much of a role to play as regulating the sport. And that's where, like, that's where the shift is, like, a lot in the last like year and a half, especially, like since we announced the T100 with the PTO, that's where that's where the vision is, and we see it going further in that direction. And then now, of course, we have a new leadership, a new presidency with Antonio, and that is going to be different. Like it's not they're not he's not coming in to do the same things necessarily that Marisol did so well. He's going to do that and do more if he wants to do more, and that's just the way it works within sport or with any organization when you have change of leadership or change of ownership. So I think like that is like, you know, already looking towards where we want to go rather than like focusing on what we've done in the past and then, you know, wondering what we're going to do next. So that vision and that, like we say, like that cultural change, not only internally within the organization and within the national federations and like us as a governing body, but also like how we work with our private organizers. Like that's a role we have to play, and we have to play that as much as we possibly can and make everybody understand that like we're not here to just sit and watch. We're here to partake and assist as much as we can.
Was lucky enough to be with Leo Berger last week and Angie Olmo at their house in the south of France, and there was no doubt at all how much he really wanted to win the World Series again this year. Like that world title is 100% his focus as well, and yeah, it just and I'm sure you're not telling me Alex Yee's not coming back after his marathon adventures and defending that title with everything that he's got. You know, that is still the prestige, that is still the one that they all want and that Alex desperately wanted in Torremolinos.
Yeah, and again, like, you know, the rules are the rules. Like they don't have to go to do every single race to win the world championship as part of the thing. We don't. We make the rules, but we make the rules within collaboration of working with the athletes committee and the coaches committee and all the other bodies. Like it's not a couple of people sitting in a room deciding and dictating where the sport's going to go. And like this, where it was like really cool in Levin, where there was like clearly there's a rule that's been there and that the athletes don't necessarily agree, and they made it very clear in the briefing that they didn't agree with it. I think that's really healthy. For me, that's really healthy. You don't have to get everything right all the time. Sometimes it's good to get it wrong, to have and then instant feedback, and then you can change it. But of course, everybody has to go down the right avenues in the process and do it. Not just a case of shouting out in a group of people that accusing something of not being right. It's like giving relevance to why you think it's right, why it should be done better, how it could be interpreted better, and then when it's up for debate of whether or not it can be changed. Not for me to decide whether it will or not, but that's how the avenues are. And I think now that that's clear, and like going forward, like those are the sort of the things that I know that like the synergy and the unity of the sport, I think it creates, like I said, like this better order, not because you need control, but better order for everybody to be able to work around it and with it, because then you can just keep moving and progressing. If you don't really know, then it's kind of like, not only do you not really know internally, but on the outside, you're kind of wondering what's going to happen next. So that's where we see that we can do, you know, we can provide a little bit better. And of course, like on the documentary side, what we did last year with Dare to Dream, heading into the Olympics, and then deciding, okay, what are we going to do this year? Okay, we can just jump straight into doing similarly what we did and then reviewing that. Or we could like say, okay, there's also another avenue of the sport and like what these athletes are doing from a T100 side and so forth. Then where are they going now? Are they going to go over here? Is this the transitional change that they want? What's the reasons they want it? Like, let's tell the real story. Let's get in behind the scenes. And I think, like, again, another collaboration. It's not just about sport. It's about advertising the sport that we're doing with the PTO to basically put it out there and get it out in the mainstream.
So come on, what was the rule that was flagged up in the briefing in Levin?
Well, Hayden wants to wear his watch, and you know, and at the moment he can't wear his watch
Gotcha.
in the race. But
Well, I mean, when that was
G20,
that was one of the rules. That was obviously there was the jewelry, nail length, and watches. They were sort of the ones that were flagged up and all discussed, right? And I remember thinking, like, yeah, maybe that is a little much. Like, and then I got my first smartwatch about 2 weeks ago. Those things are chunky. If you get that in the side of the head, and Emma Jeffcoat after Napier doing her post-race interview, cracking like earrings going on and whatnot, I was like, that is the jewelry of a front pack swimmer. Yeah.
yeah, no, and no, and like nobody wants to, you know, let's say dull down the identity of any individual in the sport, male, female, whatever, open, the works. Like nobody wants to do that. I think again, I don't make the rules. What I think is this is more of more of an investigative clarification on like how you can wear the watch. And if it's that it's only you can't wear the watch because of the swim, because of what you just said, and because of course the numerous communications that we have with the athletes committee because of the swim behavior at certain points, and this was one of the reasons why people were potentially getting having injuries from that, not substantiated, but let's just say that that was one of the things that was detailed from the athletes committee report. Then okay, you come up with a plan, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the interpretation of the rule says that you can't wear it in the other disciplines which you don't have that like contact or inadvertent contact. So again, it's just it's interpretation, it's clarification, and as I mentioned, uh, it's healthy. Like it's healthy to have that the floor is available for them to sit. Nobody said when he got up to speak. Nobody says sit down. Nobody's listening to you. In fact, the technical team there answered the question and they gave a clarification of what they thought at that particular time in front of everyone. And that's the open process that we have. Nobody's dictating to anyone.
Mm. Yeah. Well, we've gone quite broad already. Looking forward to the next couple of ones of these where we can sort of drill down a bit more into these specific bits. But yeah. So e-tri and T100 coming up. Yeah. So the T100 is just going to be like a fascinating first start. It seems ridiculous almost that it's only one season old. And you said, that those first conversations you were having a long time ago, 2 or 3 years, like it's to think how established that is already in such a short space of time speaks to how they've kind of been able to hit the nail on the head. Even, I suppose, when right at the start of last year, there was still quite a lot of question marks being raised about the longevity of this or what the reason or the purpose for it was, that race by race, they were just kind of getting ticked off, right? And that was definitely not the narrative by the end of that season.
Yeah, and look, it's an appreciation to the commitment that the PTO have done in getting behind that brand and delivering that event as an organization, right? So we share in the brand initiative, but like they are an organization in their own entity, and they're doing a great job in promoting the sport through the brand and through the other endeavors that they're looking to do. That we are, of course, interested in terms of working with them in the future more closely on. And so I think that's one part. And then again, like we said, like about Super Tri with the Triathlon World Championships in London in 2 weeks' time, this is the World Championship title. And this is something that is exciting because it's a World Championship title, and it's another thing that you can say you're a World Champion of, and that's a cool thing to have on your resume. And as we know, the Olympics are going to happen. We are in this conversation as a sport, which is fantastic. We're on the short list. We were put forward. We know that there's a delay now. So the IOC have announced that this will happen in 2027 with its original idea that it would happen in 2026. Yeah, I don't think it's not a delay. Again, it's my opinion, but it's not a delay because they can't do it. It's a delay because they need to get the house in order. And they need to make sure that just like any big, huge Olympic event, how you carve out the financial rewards from these things needs to be signed off from all the people that are involved in it. So this is where I think like they needed a little bit more time to make sure that's happened. They're dealing with a different group of people that don't necessarily have systems in place to be able to deal with such a thing. And I mean that by, like the National Olympic Committees, they are very robust now for hundreds of years. They have a robust type of a process. Whereas when you're dealing with publishers of the biggest video games in the world, which, in essence are sometimes more popular than some of the sports in the world, they don't necessarily have this like non-for-profit shadow process to be able to have conversations with. Again, like these are conversations on an IC level, but that's my understanding from the feedback I have from the colleagues over there. So I think like the time is to get everything right, not the time is we can't deliver it tomorrow, because they could pull the trigger tomorrow and it would happen. So from our standpoint, okay, we've got another couple of years to be able to refine the product. We need to find a way of course, refining the qualification for that product heading into 2027. It's good that we don't feel like we're in like some sort of like internal rush to be able to fast check everything. We can sort of like settle down and relax and make sure that we have everything in place. New software integration with MyWash, like lots of changes in the next 2 weeks heading into the event. So like those things, you don't want any added pressure that you need. But as I said before, World Championship title online. So it'll be interesting to see who walks away with it.
Chase and Beth both there to defend their titles. That will be Beth Potter against Cassandre Beaugrand for the first time since last year. Again, like, yeah, the noise is going to be insane. Hugo Milner and Johnny Brownlee on the men's side as well for GB. Henry Graff will also be there. So, yeah, it's going to be, I would imagine, a pretty partisan crowd, but looking to sort of put Cassandra on the back foot this time rather than pushing on. But and indeed, probably like a dozen or 24 tickets left remaining for that, for anyone that still can get to London for the 5th of April.
Yeah. No, it's sold out pretty fast. So like, that's good. That's good news. But yeah, I think it'll be exciting, and obviously, like, we have to stay relevant in all the spaces that are within triathlon, and it's great to be part of another Olympic program. And that's not to say, to state the obvious, that like with the indoor, that it's like overlapping. They're still completely different products in that sense, and they work in a completely different manner in terms of the way that the software is integrated. But yeah, we have to make sure again that like there's an semblance of order in terms of like how we give the opportunity to the athletes. So we're not like dividing and conquering and putting them all over the place. We make it easy for the national federations to build these high performance programs around the most generated opportunity that they have within the Olympic movement and within, let's say, commercial reality sport from qualification sides, to make sure that everybody's heading in the right direction, and then we don't, causing us any further disruptions.
And of course, the series that started in grand fashion in Abu Dhabi somewhat earlier than usual. Again, that speaks to the sort of challenges in pulling these schedules together and so on. But what we did see undoubtedly was some incredible racing, a new course that really like hit the spot, and it felt like an exciting new start to that new series. There was no, the Olympic shadows cast a bit far over this. It felt good. It felt exciting. New things being tried out, and yeah, the series has a huge. Obviously, there's a bit of a gap now before Yokohama, but then we've got new venues coming in, and the momentum that's going to take through the year is going to be pretty special.
Yeah. I mean, you were on TV more than some of the people that were racing, Doug. So new things all around, even the production side. No, I mean, like, obviously, like, it's great having a new event. That event's been a little sort of like sneaking around in the background for the last few years, and aside from the terrible bad luck we had in 2024 with the cancellation event with the weather bomb that they had there. Literally, that's what they called it. So don't take that out of context for what I'm saying. But it was just crazy. Like, it was just like, when you were there, you couldn't believe it. Like, this is the middle of the desert in the middle of summer, and we're just like, and it's raining here. It's crazy. But anyway, that's the way the world's working at the moment, and we have to be a little bit more cautious and aware of that. But this move to Al Hajjud Island and what it means there, and you can see the concept behind it when you're on the ground. Like, there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think like it would be nice to like have a place, have a home for the next 5 years, and like then really, really like get around it. And I think we can do that as an organization, knowing the long-term vision that they have. So that's good. And like from a series as a whole, as you pointed out, like again, opportunity breeds opportunity. And the ones that chose to go there or could go there, then they take the advantage of the early lead in the series, not the defining moment in the series, because it's not the amount of races that need to count to be able to have that final result leading into the finals in Wollongong. But of course, it gives you the opportunity to have let's say, the ability of choice leading for the rest of the year. So I think like, we saw a few new names pop up. I think the course was super exciting. The wind, the views, and it's always nice to go there. And of course, like, obviously it was a bit earlier in the year as it was, and that's to do with the cultural side of things. Ramadan was a little bit earlier this year, and, we work with our hosting partners in any which way that we can. And this was the request from them, and we were happy to, of course, work with them on that sense. And let's just see what happens. The date will probably not be the same next year, to state the obvious, because of Ramadan again. So we need to be able to have that sort of like, flexibility. But the sooner we can lock things in advance, and of course we do that. We don't wait until the last minute for no reason.
Yeah. and that as a course, as an area, I mean, it's exciting to be able to have like a World Surf League event literally right next to your triathlon event, and this skate parks being built all around it and so on, and the court, obviously the crash in the relay notwithstanding and so on, but like, yeah, the feedback from the course in general was really positive, and I think the images on TV did it proud too.
Yeah, and look, okay, crashes happen, and that's not to say that they couldn't have been avoided, but crashes happen, and that's the learning process from all sides. And I think like you do a course related, and of course they went around there the days before in the individual races, and there was let's say without hazard. So like just this additional 1 kilometer an hour faster, and then things were on a knife edge. But they're on a knife edge all the time, and that's of course the excitement of the racing as well, taking that risk. Okay, so what happened? I think that all the people involved in the crash were okay. That's the thing now. Okay, that sounds like, from what I understand, that everyone's okay and they're moving on, and they'll be there, hopefully racing in Yokohama. And if not in Yokohama, I think some of the athletes are racing in Singapore that were involved in that crash. I think Max is on the start line for Singapore. So, it's I'm sure that everybody is already looking forward to the next race, and they're already focusing on that.
Yeah, people are always going to like push it to the absolute limit, right? If you make a bend shallower, harder, wider, whatever, like there's always the potential, because wider, and just people will just push it that much harder going into it, no?
Yeah, and I think like if we start controlling how how fast and how slow they can go, that's not good. Like we have to be able to give them a course where they have to take that decision by themselves. And if there's an element, like I said, an element of learning from this, it's an element of learning for everyone. No one's taking the responsibility, pushing the accountability in any which way. Like we look at it first and foremost ourselves. But will we do it the same again next year? Probably not. We figure out a way of like how we enter the stadium in a different way. But that's what we were faced with. That's what we did with the familiarization. And I think the athletes knew it. Like I said, they did it in the individual race. And then unfortunately we had the accident in the team's relay. So, but yeah, again, we learn from it. We acknowledge it, and we go back to the workout to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Brand new course in Alghero coming up. Karlovy Vary, which everyone is looking forward to. Plenty of people that haven't actually raced that. It was effectively a World Cup during COVID, when you had your Flores and Vincent's race in there. But yeah, two great ones, and plenty of conversations around other potential venues, I know, for the coming seasons too. So yeah,
No, I can't say it, but yeah, there will be another one added. Let's say it like that.
Another one in 25.
Yes.
Okay. And that's what we're getting.
That's all you're getting at the moment.
All right.
I'm working my butt off.
All right, it's coming. So that's another new. So that'll be 3 new courses for the series, plus a finals in Wollongong, which will be the first time back on it down under since 2018.
Exactly. And that's like, that's exciting, I think, because, that adds an element of like, another element to the whole thing. Like you said before, similar in the scenario in Abu Dhabi, like they've been there, hadn't been there before. So there's an element to that of like not knowing the unknown, which is exciting. So I think that's good. And I think like that just gives another narrative to the story. And I think that's exciting as well.
I guess again, that's the beauty of people going off doing their thing, coming back. Like, who knows what that leaderboard is going to be looking like going into that race? And will it be defending champs, or will it be someone completely new again?
Yeah, no, I don't really know. Like I said, we've had this chat, offline, in private. So like, not to create a conflict of interest for myself, but I won't be naming any names. But I think like what I can see is that like there's opportunity there for somebody to like kick the door down, and if you are consistent, and that means you are injury free, and you are able to like manage your year, I think you will end up in Wollongong with an opportunity to be on the podium for the World Championship. And that might not mean that you've won a race in the series, because I think that the good athletes that we have at the moment might be still just a step above some of the others, just a step. But if they come, then that step will be enough, potentially. But this consistency is part of what wins you a world championship title. You don't have to win every race. And that's something that I think that someone is going to take that opportunity. And by the time we get to Wollongong, we'll have some different names that we'll have to sit down and have a nice interview with if we haven't already done it before, because they'll be genuine contenders, not only to take, like I said, to potentially take the title there or to be on the podium from a world championship perspective, but as far as future stars of the sport.
Keep across all of that, triathlonlive.tv, of course, all this season for the WTCS. We've got, Super Tri coming up April the 5th, which will also be on there. T100, where broadcast regulations allow us. Kris, it's been great. I mean, that as a whistle-stop tour, I feel like another one of those, another check-in in between Singapore and Yokohama would be good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that something will happen. Like it is, I always say to my family, and I was like, "Oh, what are you going to do today?" And I said, "Well, I've got something that I have to do today, but it's most likely not what is going to happen of actually how my day is going to go." So that's what I love about this, and I think like that's our sport in some ways, and like trying to give like a sense of a seamless order to that is part of one of my responsibilities. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to the season, and I'm sure these chats will be like, we'll have an idea. You'll send me an agenda of something, like a week before, so that we can get everything set up. And then by the time we actually get to talk, we'll be talking about 20 different other things. So let's see how it goes. But I look forward to it.
Yeah, check your phone. You've probably got about a couple of dozen messages on there ready to take you off on a tangent right now.
Exactly.
Right. Nice one, Kris. Catch you soon.